I caught a strange illness. My legs go weak the moment I smell my childhood friend's pheromones. But we're both alphas. To hide this secret, I deliberately avoided him. I never expected that when college started, we would be assigned to the exact same dorm room. The familiar scent of red wine permeated the room. During the long, endless nights, I could only draw my curtains and bite my pillow to endure it. Realizing that I would be exposed sooner or later if this continued, I lied and said I found an Omega partner and needed to move out. On the night I supposedly got together with my fake partner, Patrick rubbed my scent gland, deliberately releasing his pheromones to force me into an early heat. His deep voice rang in my ear, dripping with temptation. Do Omega pheromones smell better than mine? Chapter 1. After discovering my condition and running away, I had imagined reuniting with Patrick countless times. Maybe it would be years later when we both had established careers, or an accidental encounter after starting our own families, or just brushing shoulders on a busy street. But I truly never expected it to be this soon. Carrying bags of all sizes, I finally managed to climb to the 6th floor. Pushing open the dorm room door, I saw a man sitting by the window. Even though we had only been apart for a year, seeing that familiar face still brought a tidal wave of nostalgia. The luggage in my hands suddenly lost its strength, dropping to the ground with a heavy thud. Hearing the noise, Patrick's gaze swept over lightly. When he saw me, he let out a soft chuckle. Ethan, long time no see. I stared blankly at his icy gaze. Those eyes, which used to always be so gentle, now held not a single trace of a smile. I knew he was definitely angry about me leaving without a word, but I had never seen him look so expressionless. It made it hard for me to breathe. What a coincidence. Standing in the doorway, caught in a dilemma, I could only smile awkwardly. It really was too much of a coincidence, so much so that it made me want to cry. I had purposely chosen a city far from home, yet I still ended up running into him. Even knowing he was angry right now, I couldn't explain the reason. I couldn't exactly say that I, an alpha, get weak in the knees from smelling another alpha's pheromones, right? I wouldn't be able to say it even if someone beat me to death. Just my rotten luck. It's not a coincidence. Patrick curled his lips mockingly. His pitch-black eyes stared intently at me, making my skin crawl. After saying that, he didn't speak another word. What did not a coincidence mean? Did he not want to see me? I felt a bit disappointed. My sudden disappearance had indeed destroyed the bond between us. A silent atmosphere spread through the room. Just as I was racking my brain to find an excuse to ease the tension, Patrick suddenly looked away, lowered his head, and pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. Seeing him skillfully take out a cigarette, light it, and bring it to his lips, my pupils contracted sharply. Since when did you start smoking? Patrick gave a hollow, mirthless smile. A year ago. Exactly when I discovered my strange illness and left without saying goodbye. After our adult presentation, Patrick and I went to hang out at a bar. That was the first time I discovered my condition. The bar's dim lighting paired with lyrical music, and the hard liquor acted as a catalyst. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the crowd, and a strong scent of oranges permeated the air. And Omega had gone into heat. The frantic pheromones caused all the alphas present to react. Yet I felt absolutely nothing. Patrick was affected. With a slightly flushed face, he leaned against the crook of my neck. Ethan, are you reacting to it? Reacting to what? I frowned, a bit confused. I just smell a really strong orange scent. Did someone spill a drink? Hearing my answer, Patrick was clearly taken aback. Then, a low chuckle rang by my ear. You have no reaction to the smell of an Omega. Are you really an alpha? This is the smell of an Omega? I sniffed hard. Aside from feeling like the scent was too strong and a bit suffocating, I felt nothing else. But basic biological knowledge told me this wasn't right. I grew a little nervous. There shouldn't be anything wrong with me, right? Patrick's slightly cool nose nudged aside the suppressant patch on my scent gland and took a light sniff. Nothing's wrong. You're perfectly fine. I don't know if it was just an illusion, but I kept feeling like there was a faint hint of disappointment in his tone. That's good, then. I breathed a sigh of relief. Patrick's face pressed against my neck quickly grew hot. Is it really uncomfortable? I touched his forehead. It was burning. "Mhm," Patrick replied with a nasal hum, leaning lazily against me. I casually peeled off his suppressant patch. "Will this make you feel a bit better?" Before I could hear his answer, amidst the room full of that strong orange scent, an incredibly overpowering smell of red wine rushed into my nasal cavity. My legs instantly gave out. With quick reflexes, Patrick pulled me into his arms. "Why is your reaction a beat too slow?" He found it funny, his fingertips gently pressing against my burning scent gland. But I clearly realized that it wasn't because of the orange scent. It was because of this red wine scent, Patrick's pheromones. But we're both alphas, held in Patrick's arms, my entire being surrounded by the scent of red wine coming from his body. I couldn't help but writhe in unbearable discomfort. The situation instantly reversed. Patrick, who had just been draped over me looking sickly, now had clear eyes, while I couldn't even stand steady. "Why is your reaction so strong?" Patrick frowned. "Do you want to leave?" I nodded frantically. Having inhaled too much of his pheromones at such close range, if I stayed any longer, I feared my own rut would be triggered early. But I quickly regretted making that decision. Patrick's house was very close to the bar, so he supported me and took me back to his place. At the bar, there were at least other smells to dilute the red wine scent that was driving me crazy. But in Patrick's house, his scent was everywhere. I felt even worse, barely managing to muster enough energy to ask, "Patrick, do you have any suppressants at home?" "No," Patrick answered very quickly. Hearing those two words, I bit into the pillow in despair. It looked like I could only tough it out. Patrick pulled the corner of the pillow out of my mouth, his voice hoarse. "If it's really unbearable, I can help you." My head was spinning. In my heart, I thought, "I don't need your help, just stay away from me." But I couldn't speak at all, and could only let Patrick help me relieve it. The next day, my legs were weak, but my mind clearly remembered everything that had happened last night. Patrick was still fast asleep. Without waking him, I hurriedly went to the hospital for a checkup. The results showed that I had contracted a rare condition. I could be induced into heat by an alpha's pheromones, reacting even more intensely than an omega. In other words, as long as Patrick wasn't wearing a suppressant patch, I could go into heat at any moment while around him. Unable to accept this fact, I packed my bags and transferred schools overnight. This was the first time I had seen Patrick since then. Chapter 2. There was a lot of luggage for moving in, so I busied myself with making my bed. Patrick lit a cigarette to himself, smoking one after another. I watched with a bit of concern, but I didn't know what right or position I had to say anything, so I could only fret anxiously in my heart. When our other roommates arrived, I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking Patrick would be considerate of others and put out his cigarette. The result was completely different from what I expected. Sammy pushed the door open, frowned, and said, "This smoke." My heart skipped a beat, waiting for his next words. "Smells like a good cigarette. Bro, give me one." I was instantly and thoroughly disappointed. Two chain smokers had found each other. Patrick sat by the window, so most of the smoke drifted outside. There was only a faint smell of smoke in the room, not yet to the point of choking anyone. But I still coughed twice on purpose. Patrick looked up at me, didn't say a word, but crushed out his half-smoked cigarette in the ashtray. Sammy looked at me, then at Patrick. He took a deep drag, smoked his cigarette down to the butt, and tossed it into the ashtray too. Turning back to me, he grinned, revealing neat white teeth. "Don't worry, bro, we have manners." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at his antics. After unpacking all afternoon, we were all covered in sweat. Sammy and the other roommates seemed to know each other. They finished unpacking first and went to shower. Watching them emerge from the bathroom enveloped in steam, my eyes widened. "Are you guys gay?" "What do you mean gay? We're just good brothers." Sammy grinned, wrapping his arm around Jerry's neck. "It's so convenient to shower together. Haven't you ever showered with your best friend?" I was dumbfounded. Best friends could shower together? Patrick, who had been silent this whole time, suddenly spoke up. "How long have you known each other?" Sammy tilted his head up, looking proud. "Grew up playing together since we were kids." "Is that so? Then you must have a really good relationship." Patrick's tone was flat. Of course. Hearing Patrick ask, Sammy got even more enthusiastic, pulling a helpless-looking Jerry along. We've never even had a fight. How enviable. When he said this, Patrick's gaze swept over me, seemingly by accident, yet entirely on purpose. Of course I understood what he meant. I could only pretend I didn't hear him and silently pack my toiletries. After I finished showering, Patrick walked past me. Smelling that familiar red wine scent, my knees went weak again, and I hurriedly scrambled onto my bed. The dorm is a relatively private space, so it's perfectly normal for everyone to take off their suppressant patches. My body was reacting again, and only then did a delayed headache start to set in. How about it? My pheromones smell like pears. Smells good, right? Sammy smiled and struck up a conversation when he saw me come out. I nodded, trying my best to look normal. Yeah, it smells pretty good. Ethan, what do your pheromones smell like? Why can't I smell them? Sammy took a deep breath. There were only 3 alpha scents in the air, so he was very curious about my pheromones, staring at me with bright, wide eyes. Lychee. I'm wearing a suppressant patch, I answered casually, pulling my bed curtains shut. Waves of heat surged within my body, making me very uncomfortable. I fumbled around, took out a suppressant, and gave myself an injection. Sleeping so early? Sammy muttered softly. Although he still wanted to ask why I wore a suppressant patch even in the dorm, he wasn't completely dense. Seeing me close my curtains, he didn't say anything more. After injecting the suppressant, my symptoms eased a lot. I breathed a sigh of relief, but my happiness didn't last long. When Patrick came out of the shower, the red wine pheromones in the entire room instantly thickened. I felt my just-cooled blood boil again, and I couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. The moment that sound slipped out, I thought, oh no. The room instantly fell eerily quiet. Patrick's cold, clear voice broke the silence. Ethan, what's wrong with you? Enduring the discomfort, I said, I have a bit of a cold. Patrick didn't say anything else. Just as I thought he was going to come over and pull open my bed curtains, footsteps sounded. But they weren't walking toward me. He was getting into his own bed. I breathed a sigh of relief, yet forcefully suppressed a tiny, inexplicable pang of disappointment in my heart. The doctor had said suppressants were useless on me. It seemed that was indeed the case. I suffered through the entire night, not daring to make a sound, only able to bite my pillow and tough it out. The next day, my face was full of exhaustion. Wow, you look terrible. Sammy pointed at my face in surprise. I gave a bitter smile. Anyone would look terrible after pulling an all-nighter. If this continued, in less than a month, I'd be sent to the hospital due to physical distress. This couldn't go on. I patted my face to cheer myself up. I had to find a suitable excuse to move out. I arrived at class yawning constantly. A young couple in the front row was making out without any hesitation. The soft, delicate Omega leaned into the Alpha's arms. When are we moving out? My heat is coming soon. Once I pack my things, we'll move out. The Alpha pinched the boy's cheek in his arms, speaking dotingly. Half asleep, it was like a sudden epiphany hit me. Right? As long as I said I was in a relationship, wouldn't it be super easy to move out? This excuse was absolutely flawless, so perfect it made me want to laugh. So, with a smile on my lips, I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, I was actually lying in Patrick's arms. Looking bewildered, I struggled to sit up. Why are you? Patrick interrupted me. He wasn't as cold as yesterday. His voice was gentle. Didn't sleep well? His eyes carried concern, making me daze out and feel like I was back in high school. Back in high school, when I got sleepy between classes, sleeping on the desk was uncomfortable, so Patrick would thoughtfully act as my pillow. Back then, our classmates said we were cheesy, but I didn't care. Thinking about it now, we really were too intimate back then. Unnaturally rubbing my burning cheek with my knuckles, I nodded under Patrick's watchful gaze. Yeah, a bit tired. Make sure to get plenty of rest. Patrick raised his hand, seemingly wanting to touch my face, but stopped right before it reached me. Instead, he smoothed out the hair I had messed up while sleeping. Once my hair was smoothed out, Patrick lowered his eyes, picked up his backpack, and said in a cold tone, "I'm leaving first." By the time Patrick walked to the classroom door, I still hadn't processed it. It wasn't until he pushed the door open and his back disappeared through the doorway that I snapped back to my senses and hurriedly packed my books. When I chased after him outside, Patrick was already gone. Sigh. I let out a heavy sigh. But becoming strangers is better than him finding out about my illness and distancing himself in disgust, I thought, trying to find joy in the sorrow. Although I already had an excuse to move out, I had to stay in the dorm for at least a full week so it wouldn't seem too deliberate. To avoid exposing myself this week, I bought piles of suppressants and suppressant patches. The doctor said suppressants were no longer effective for me, but using them was still better than nothing. I silently gripped the sleeping pills I had gone through so much trouble to buy. This was my trump card. If I'm asleep, I shouldn't have any reactions. With everything prepared, I quietly waited for night to fall. Chapter 3. Strangely, after Patrick came out of the shower, there were no pheromones of his in the room. "Patrick, you're wearing a suppressant patch too?" Sammy looked bewildered. "Those things are so uncomfortable to wear. How come both of you like using them?" I was also very puzzled and pricked up my ears to listen to Patrick's answer. "My susceptible period might be approaching, and I'm afraid of affecting you guys." Patrick's voice was flat. He turned his head and shot a seamless glance at me, then quickly withdrew his gaze. "Get a good night's rest tonight." I didn't know who he was talking to, because Patrick was facing the wall when he spoke. Sammy looked left and right. Seeing no one respond, he chimed in, "Okay," but my face turned pale with shock. "Patrick. Does he know? It should just be a coincidence." I comforted myself. I had hidden myself away right after discovering this illness. How could Patrick possibly know? I'm definitely just scaring myself. I gave a self-deprecating smile. But it was perfect timing for Patrick's rut to arrive. I could finally get a good night's sleep. However, this was only temporary. I still had to find an Omega partner and move out to be safe. But who should I find? I fell into deep thought. After thinking about it all night, the next day I thought of the perfect candidate, Gabriel. He was a good friend I made after transferring schools. Although he was an alpha, he looked rather delicate. Plus, besides him, I couldn't find anyone else who could act in this play with me. The perfect candidate. I contacted him to explain the situation, and sure enough, he readily agreed. I waited quietly for a week to pass. On the weekend, everyone was in the dorm. I pretended to speak casually. "I got into a relationship. I'm planning to move out." The hand Patrick was using to scroll on his phone froze. Before he could react, Sammy yelled out in shock first, "What? This is way too sudden. What does that Omega look like? Let me see." Sammy eagerly scooted over to me for gossip, and I pulled up a photo to show him. Pretty cute. I'm dying of jealousy." Sure enough, good-looking people get off the single market fast. Sammy gave a wry smile and poked Jerry's stomach with his elbow, poking him until he laughed out loud. Sammy was baffled. "What are you laughing at?" Jerry looked innocent. "You poked my ticklish spot." I looked at their relaxed atmosphere with envy. If I hadn't gotten sick, Patrick and I would probably be just like this. Hearing the news that I was no longer single, Patrick just sat in silence, his phone placed face down on the desk. He lowered his head and pulled out a cigarette. He didn't smoke it, just played with it in his hands. When his eyes met mine, he viciously crushed the cigarette into the ashtray. Giving a hollow, mirthless smile, he curled his lips. "You're really something, Ethan." This sound was like a sigh, yet it carried a hint of gnashing teeth. Patrick was angry. Although getting into a relationship so suddenly was a bit inconsiderate, his reaction was much bigger than I anticipated. I didn't know what to do anymore. My silence triggered Patrick's dissatisfaction. He cast a helpless glance at me. The emotions in that look were too complex for me to read, but they sent a sharp sting through my heart. Patrick picked up his phone, stood up, and walked out. Unable to set my mind at ease, I chased after him. "They're not going to start a fight, are they? Should we go out?" Sammy looked at Jerry in confusion. "Leave it be." Jerry gave him a helpless look. Sammy was great at everything except being a little dense. "All right then." Sammy rubbed his nose. But if you secretly ditch the single life behind my back too, I'll beat you to a pulp. He balled up his fists and widened his eyes, half joking and half threatening. Jerry twitched his lips and said cheekily, "Oh, I'm so scared," mocked. Sammy threw a punch at him. "You're asking for a beating. Patrick, wait for me." Seeing Patrick about to turn the corner and disappear from my sight, I hurriedly called out. Hearing my voice, Patrick stopped, but he didn't turn around, only leaving me with a lonely silhouette of his back. Patrick came from a single-parent family. He was 2 years younger than me and loved to get angry. When I was very young, I realized that Patrick was the younger brother, and I had to yield to him often to make him happy. Little Patrick didn't like me playing with other people. When I played with my classmates, he would scrunch up his face and stand to the side, sulking. Although he wouldn't speak up, I knew he was jealous. So I would deliberately tease him. If Patrick doesn't cheer up, I'm going to get mad. Little Patrick would fearfully throw himself into my arms, looking up at me as a tiny, teary-eyed ball. "Don't be mad, brother Ethan. I'm happy." I found teasing him funny, but seeing him cry made my heart ache. Later, as this happened more often, I slowly stopped making friends other than Patrick. I didn't feel lonely. To me, one friend was exactly enough. I only needed Patrick, and Patrick only needed me. But how could I have contracted a disease like this? I would rather have undergone a secondary presentation and become an Omega than get this kind of illness. But I couldn't say it. I took a few steps forward and grabbed his cuff. "What's wrong? Why are you angry? We can talk things out properly." "Talk things out properly?" Patrick sneered, as if he were incredibly disdainful. He turned around, his eyes carrying hidden fury. Looking down at me from above, his voice was suppressed and hoarse. "I've been holding back for a very long time, Ethan," although Patrick had been calling me by my full name ever since our reunion. This time it made my heart tremble. I didn't know what to say either, so I could only speak dryly. "Stop being angry." "Hey!" Patrick let out a cold laugh. As if exhausted, he leaned against the wall and pinched the bridge of his nose with long, fair fingers. "Are you uncomfortable?" I didn't like seeing him frown, but in this situation, I could only use the most useless words to comfort him. For example, telling him not to be angry when he was angry, or telling him not to be sad when he was sad. Perhaps realizing that I couldn't say the words he wanted to hear, he took a few deep breaths and suddenly, eerily, calmed down. "You shouldn't have come out looking for me. I was originally planning to give up." Patrick's voice was very low, like he was talking to himself. "What?" I didn't catch it clearly. "Nothing." He shook his head, a half-smile curling his lips. "Let's go. You're moving out, right? I'll help you pack." Seeing that there was no anger on Patrick's face, I completely relaxed. Okay. Chapter 4. I had just moved in not long ago, so I didn't have much luggage and finished packing quickly. I carried a few large bags, while Patrick dragged my suitcase. The two of us finally managed to get everything downstairs. "I can handle the rest myself." I called a car. "It'll be here any minute." I wiped the sweat from my forehead. "Aren't you going to invite me to check out your new place?" Patrick raised an eyebrow, the coldness from earlier completely gone from his face. Hearing his request, I froze for a moment, then immediately felt a wave of happiness. "You want to go? Of course you can." I answered hurriedly, terrified he would change his mind. Patrick's sudden friendly attitude opened my chatterbox. After getting in the car, I couldn't stop talking. "Once I'm settled in, if you want to come hang out, just send me a message in advance. I'm free anytime. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment, so if you want to stay for a few days, you can. The location is pretty good. Because I was so happy, I talked a lot." Patrick listened quietly, occasionally nodding, his deep gaze constantly lingering on my lips. I had realized a long time ago that even though I was the older one and often took care of Patrick when we were kids, as we grew up, he became more mature than me, and it was often him taking care of me instead. Rather than saying Patrick couldn't live without me, it was more accurate to say I couldn't live without him. That's why I cherished our friendship so much. After talking so much, my face flushed a little. Am I being a bit too chatty? Snapping back to reality, I covered my mouth in embarrassment. I had been the only one talking. Patrick hadn't said a single word. When I looked at him, he turned his head, avoiding my gaze, and pressed the button to roll down the car window. The moment the wind rushed in, I heard him say, "No, enjoy your happiness while you still can." During the year I was gone, Patrick had become increasingly unpredictable. Sometimes it was really hard for me to understand his words, like the sentence just now. I pursed my lips and didn't continue talking. Took a lot of effort to move all the luggage inside. I dusted off my hands and said, "Let's go. Let's go grab something to eat." No rush. Patrick leaned lazily against the door, arms crossed over his chest. "When is he coming?" I quickly realized Patrick was asking about Gabriel. Next week, I guess." I randomly made up a date. Patrick seemed very pleased to hear this, his eyes curving into a smile. Plenty of time then. I was gradually getting used to Patrick's way of thinking now, so I went along with his words. "Yeah, plenty of time." "Huh. Why is the door locked from the inside?" I walked to the door, trying to open it, but found the door handle wouldn't budge. Patrick reached out his hand. The door key was dangling from his index finger. He leaned sideways against the wall, watching me. "Looking for this?" An ominous premonition suddenly enveloped me. My voice trembled slightly. "Patrick, let's go eat." "I'm not hungry. I want to eat something else." Patrick's eyes were full of playful teasing. Suddenly, the scent of red wine pheromones exploded in front of me, flooding the entire room. I was too close to him. After inhaling a few breaths of his pheromones, my head started to spin. I bit down hard on the tip of my tongue just to force myself to speak. "Patrick, what are you doing?" "I want to go outside." He didn't speak. I couldn't wait any longer and reached out to grab the key in his hand. Patrick deliberately raised his arm high, and with his left hand, smoothly pulled me in. Already weak in the knees, I fell straight into his embrace, inhaling several more breaths of his pheromones. Patrick's deep chuckle sounded by my ear. He sighed softly against it. "Do omega pheromones smell better than mine?" I felt like I had been struck by lightning. My last thought before losing consciousness was, "I'm doomed." Patrick carried me bridal style to the bed. I was completely controlled by the pheromones, my hands tightly gripping his collar, refusing to let go. "Kiss me." I tilted my head up, staring hungrily at Patrick's pale lips. They looked soft. They must be nice to kiss. Patrick curled his lips. "If you want it, come get it yourself." I pulled him down and tilted my head up to kiss him, but just as I was about to touch his lips, Patrick deliberately lifted his head, and I only kissed his chin. "Why?" I looked at him in confusion. Patrick smiled slyly. "I won't let you." Realizing I was being teased, I felt a bit angry and a bit wronged. I forcefully tugged at Patrick's collar, wanting to kiss his lips, but Patrick was dead set on not letting me. After failing several times, I angrily pushed Patrick away, turned my head, and buried my face in the pillow. Patrick wasn't in a hurry. He lay on his stomach by the edge of the bed, propping up his chin and watching me. He was relaxed and at ease, but I was agonizingly uncomfortable. Every breath of pheromones I took felt like being roasted over a fire. Every cell in my body was screaming. I wanted to kiss him, wanted to be kissed by Patrick, wanted to be marked by Patrick. In this silent standoff, I was the first to surrender. I turned my head, revealing the half of my face that was already flushed red from being teased. Looking at Patrick, I spoke shyly but firmly. "Kiss me, big brother." Since when did I discover that calling Patrick big brother would make him satisfy all my demands? In high school, I was very lazy. At dinner time, the classmates would all go to the cafeteria together, but I only wanted to catch up on sleep in the classroom. Patrick didn't want to go alone, so I would act spoiled and call him big brother. And the tips of his ears would turn so red they looked like they were bleeding. I suppose in his life before, he had never seen someone so shameless. Every time we had a standoff, he was always the one to compromise in the end. This trick always worked wonders. Sure enough, upon hearing this sentence, Patrick's eyes instantly became dangerous. The veins on his temples bulged slightly. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down, and I could hear the sound of him swallowing. Just as I thought Patrick was going to lean in and kiss me, he spoke. His clear, youthful voice carried the hoarseness of desire, yet it trembled slightly, hiding an imperceptible trace of fear. Last time I touched you, you hid for a year. If I touch you this time, how many years are you going to hide? Patrick's prominent knuckles were trembling slightly. I instinctively felt sad, but I didn't know what to say to comfort him. I won't hide. Bro, please help me. I feel so uncomfortable. I curled up in distress, panting heavily, looking pitifully at Patrick, the only person who could help relieve my pain. Patrick finally stood up and leaned over to look at me. His voice was very soft, like a gust of wind about to dissipate. Ethan, say you love me. Bro, I love you. Patrick shook his head. Call me Patrick. Patrick. Patrick, I love you. I love you too. Patrick closed his eyes and leaned in for a kiss. That jelly didn't taste sweet at all. It was cold, bitter, and astringent. So astringent that it made the very tip of my heart ache. Chapter 5. In the midst of this madness, I woke up first. Patrick's brows were tightly furrowed. I reached out and felt his forehead. It was a bit hot. After losing consciousness yesterday, driven by an alpha's instinct, I frantically marked him. Now, 2 different alpha pheromones were clashing within his body. Patrick's scent gland was covered in my bite marks. I touched my own. It was completely unscathed. That made me feel even worse. I got out of bed to get some fever-reducing medicine. There was still an unopened box in my luggage. Just as I stood up, my wrist was yanked by a sudden force. Still have the strength to move. I should have marked you yesterday. Patrick's voice was very low, so low it felt like a hallucination. Patrick, you're awake? I asked softly. He tried hard to open his eyes, his eyelashes and eyebrows trembling. It was obvious he was fighting against his own body. Get some good rest, I comforted him. Right at that moment he finally opened his eyes. Don't leave. Okay. I won't leave, I hurriedly promised. Hearing those words, Patrick seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. He slipped back into unconsciousness, the hand holding mine dropping limply. I smiled helplessly and resigned myself to mixing the medicine. Patrick, time for your medicine. No reaction. I scooped up some medicine with a spoon and brought it to his lips, but his mouth was shut tight, and the medicine all spilled out. This guy, left with no choice, I took a sip myself and fed it to him mouth to mouth. The medicine was incredibly bitter, making me scrunch up my face. Just as I was wondering how to pry his mouth open, the moment our lips touched, it was as if a switch had been flipped in Patrick. He cupped the back of my head and deepened the kiss. When the kiss ended, he looked completely satisfied. So sweet. Is there more? I looked at the empty medicine cup and the words, extremely bitter, on the packaging, my mouth twitching. Gone. Patrick smacked his lips, as if it was a real pity. Then, he wrapped his arms around me and fell into a deep sleep, sleeping straight until the sun went down. When Patrick woke up, the very first thing he did was feel the blanket beside him. It was already ice cold. Just like that morning a year ago, a sense of panic surged into his heart. He sat up abruptly and shouted, Ethan, I'm here. Hearing the commotion, I closed my book and pushed open the balcony door. You didn't leave. Seeing me perfectly fine, he breathed a sigh of relief. Yeah, I'm not leaving. From now on, I'm never leaving again. What do you mean? Patrick subconsciously gripped the blanket tighter. I looked straight into his eyes, conveying my absolute sincerity. Patrick, let's be together. Patrick and I got together. Actually, we should have been together long ago. I could never find a second person in this world who treats me as well as he does. But when he dragged me to meet his parent, I still chickened out. Standing at his front door, I couldn't help but say, Actually, we don't really have to tell your mom. Why? He asked, confused. We're an AA couple. Your dad, I trailed off. Aunt Cheryl was a pitiful woman. After being childhood sweethearts with her husband for 20 years and getting pregnant, her husband met his so-called fated alpha and abandoned her and their child. Aunt Cheryl gave birth to Patrick all alone. I grew up with Patrick but rarely saw her. On the rare occasions I did, she was always haggard and impatient. I didn't know if she would mind an AA relationship, but it definitely wouldn't be easy for her to accept. Patrick seemed to understand my concerns and gave a light chuckle. You still remember that? I'd completely forgotten. He scratched the palm of my hand and blinked. It's fine. Come inside with me. Damn it. Deadline's here again. Just as we pushed the door open, we heard Aunt Cheryl's furious roar. I jumped in fright, but Patrick seemed used to it, squeezing my hand to comfort me. Mom, I brought my boyfriend home. Give me a minute. Let me finish drawing this. Aunt Cheryl answered without even lifting her head. Patrick shrugged helplessly. Let's wait. He and I sat on the sofa for 2 hours. He was relaxed and casual while I was on pins and needles. Seeing how nervous I was, he laughed happily. Relax. My mom isn't going to eat you. Patrick really didn't know how I felt. I secretly decided that when I brought him home in the future, I'd leave him hanging for 2 hours too, just so he could taste what this felt like. Just as my back was aching and I could barely hold on anymore, Aunt Cheryl finally finished her artwork. Finally done drawing. I'm exhausted. She walked over, massaging her lower back and pounding her arms. A pair of tired eyes looked us up and down, making me break out in a cold sweat. She looked at us for a moment, then suddenly burst out laughing, her voice bright and hearty. Not bad, you finally caught him. I've thought you two were a perfect match since you were kids. Patrick's mom was actually like this? Before I could even react, she sat down next to me and took my hand. Ethan, don't argue with Patrick anymore in the future. Last time you transferred schools, he couldn't eat or sleep well. He asked around about your school every single day. When he finally found out, he applied to the exact same university as you. And to get into the same dorm room, he went to the counselor and even the principal, going through so much trouble to get transferred over. You have no idea how he cried under his covers every night. Listening to these exposed secrets, Patrick couldn't sit still any longer. He sat up bolt straight, his face so red it looked like it was going to bleed. Mom, don't talk nonsense. How am I talking nonsense? That's exactly how you were. Aunt Cheryl rolled her eyes at her son. I listened, stunned. I finally understood the meaning behind Patrick's "not a coincidence" when we reunited. I suddenly felt incredibly guilty. Lowering my head, I whispered to him, I'm sorry. Patrick's face was full of heartache. Just as he was about to speak, Aunt Cheryl spoke first. Why are you apologizing to him? I don't even need to ask to know that Patrick definitely bullied you, and that's why you left. Don't think you can hide it from me. Next time he bullies you, tell me, and see if I don't teach him a lesson. Although I hadn't interacted much with Aunt Cheryl in the past, I never expected her to be this nice. I felt ashamed of my previous thoughts and grasped her hand in return. Thank you, Mom. Chapter 6. So you didn't leave because I touched you that time? After leaving Patrick's house, he seemed to have figured some things out. How could it be because of that kind of thing? My face instantly grew hot, and I didn't know what to say. Patrick got his answer from my silence. Fine, fine, fine. He smiled, gnashing his teeth a bit. That father I've never met still ended up leaving a shadow over me after all. Who would have thought that they actually didn't care at all? And it seemed like I was the only one worrying blindly. I lowered my head like a child who had done something wrong. No, I'm so mad. Ethan, kiss me. The more Patrick thought about it, the madder he got. He suddenly stopped and hugged me. I obediently grabbed his collar, stood on my tiptoes, and kissed him. Not mad anymore, right? Not mad anymore. I kissed him again. Are you happy now? Happy. Having taken advantage of the situation, Patrick smiled like an idiot. I kissed him one more time. Then do you love me? I love you so much, Ethan. I love you too, Patrick. This autumn, we finally got together. If you enjoyed this story, remember to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.